Hey everybody, Dave here from Philly Tech Entrepreneurs with our monthly webinar. We're going to give everybody the traditional kind of minute and a half to join, and then we'll get started. All right, hopefully that was enough time for anyone who wanted to join to come on over, check the stream on YouTube or LinkedIn, or just even join Restream. Today, we're going to be talking about beating the odds. This is a presentation about how startups can outmaneuver bigger, more established competitors. Before we get started, I want to apologize for last week. If anybody's watching and they showed up last week and there was no webinar and we ended up moving it a week out to today, very sorry about that. I went to log into Restream, which is the webinar platform that we use, and it just wasn't loading. And already, like, I had tried to figure it out, like 10 minutes had gone by, and this being kind of just a 30-minute webinar, it just felt kind of silly at that point to try to like figure it out. So I decided to postpone it for a week, and I appreciate anybody that decided to check it out again today. Today, we're going to be talking about how startups can outmaneuver bigger, more established competitors, which I think is a super important theme. Actually, before we let me hang on this title for a quick second, because I feel like it's fairly rare these days when you launch a startup that you are in a market with no one else. That's relatively rare. Um, and in fact, people will even say it's a bit concerning. A lot of times it's good to see competitors. It's good to see that other people are in the market and that there's some type of a presence of a market here. But as the new, fish in the pond, you have to kind of figure out how you can get noticed. And we're going to be talking about, give you some ideas on how to go about that. Before we get into the presentation, I want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Dave. I'm an entrepreneur. I live in Philadelphia, and I've been here about 5 or 6 years. I run a marketing agency and also working on a startup of my own called Lifer. And I run a community called Philly Tech Entrepreneurs, which is a free community on Slack and Meetup for local tech entrepreneurs to engage, grow, and connect. And this webinar is a part of that series. So we do a monthly webinar. We do a weekly podcast. We have a nice Slack channel. We do in-person events every month. So if any of that sounds like your jam, please check us out at phillytechentrepreneurs.com. That being said, let's talk about the webinar, right? So there's a number of challenges that startups feel they have when they're competing with larger companies. They might feel they are underfunded. They have a lack of resources. They might feel that they have limited brand recognition. They might feel a difficulty scaling quickly, or that they are competing on product features and innovation that they don't have. They may not be able to attract and retain the same level of talent because they're not a well-known entity. Chances are, if you are a new startup, you have several of these problems, if not all of them. And so, given that, you might kind of like, how is it possible that I'm going to be able to compete with larger companies when they have all the above and I have none of that? And we're going to give you some ideas today, because it's not all gloom and doom, right? There are actual advantages that small businesses, startups have. And here's a couple of things, just some statistics. 92% of consumers trust small businesses for personalized services. So you have potentially the trust of your market. Agile companies are 2x more likely to achieve faster time to market. So what this, smaller companies that can make quicker decisions, that they have less bureaucracy, they're able to iterate and achieve a faster time to market. 70% of startups with a strong, unique UVP here, in niche. It's a universal value proposition or unique value proposition. In niche, focus, grow faster than competitors. Again, as when you get to a larger company, and I will admit, I've never run like Google or anything like that. I've had companies that were maybe 20 or so people. But even at that scale, I have seen how things start to break down. I've seen how communication breaks down, how the ability to act and work quickly breaks down. There's a lot more people that have to be involved in decision making, communication that has to happen. Um, there are disadvantages of being larger, and there's a lot of inefficiencies too. So that is our opening. If you are a startup, it is possible to outmaneuver bigger, more established competitors. Many of the competitors, many of the companies that we think of today as being very large, were not the first ones in that industry, right? Facebook, before Facebook, there was MySpace. Before Google, there was Yahoo and Alta Vista and things like that. Somehow they managed to do it, right? So we have 8 points here. We're going to discuss them each individually. That again, you have to think about your market, your competition, your business, and whether or not this is going to make sense. But hopefully, some of these will spur some innovative thinking into how you can approach it. So let's talk about understanding your competitors thoroughly. This is a huge part of entering any type of market. You need to do a competitor analysis. You need to identify who the competitors are. What's their market share look like? What's their positioning look like? What are they doing well? And what are they doing poorly? I think often we focus on, the weaknesses, right? That's kind of the reason we get into the game. And we like to kind of put the competition down and talk about how they're missing XYZ opportunity. But let's also respect their strengths and let's understand what they are doing well and what we can potentially learn from and emulate. Um, any large company likely has some underserved niches or customer segments because you just can't be everything for everyone, right? So as a company grows and starts to define its positioning, there's likely a subset of users that feel neglected, that feel like the product is not moving the direction that they want. That's often your opportunity. That is your early adopters. Those are the people that are going to be the easiest to tear away from your competition. And so they're the ones you kind of want to focus on. We have some recommendations for tools that you can use for competitor research. There's no right or wrong way to go about this, though. I would recommend kind of checking out some analyses on and see kind of what you like. Let's talk about agility. Um, Speed and flexibility is your friend. Okay. If you're a startup founder, you need to get in the hang of making decisions quickly. You need to understand what decisions are consequential and which ones just have to be made and maybe shouldn't be worth the same amount of time. It's amazing to me that, sometimes people will spend about as much time, buying, thinking about what house they want to buy as, walking around picking out clothes in the mall or something like that. I mean, these are two decisions that just have very different levels of let's say consequentiality. That word probably is not actually a word, but I'm sure you understand the idea. The impact of those decisions is very different, and we need to understand what decisions are worth the time to spend a lot on, and which ones just kind of need to be made. And the difference between the right and the wrong, the optimal, the non-optimal, service provider A versus service provider B is probably not that significant. But there's a big difference between not making the decision at all and making the decision. There are things that you can do. There's A/B testing. There's trying to get feedback from the users that can help inform your decision making. Small companies will struggle to do some of these things. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut. You have to move on, and then you have to be willing to undo what you've done if it doesn't go in the way that you want. Don't feel stubborn and sort of married to a particular decision. Let's talk about the UVP, the unique value proposition. Differentiation is key here. So, for example, we talked in a couple slides ago about targeting that underserved market. If we were going to target that underserved market, who are they, and what is the value proposition that we are making to them to draw them away from the competition? UVPs can change over time. The UVP that I have on day one for my business may evolve into something different over time. So don't feel concerned if, hey, this isn't necessarily long term what I want to be doing, but you need to be able to make strides in the beginning. And so you want a UVP that feels like something your competitors can't easily replicate. And basically, is it going to be the features that your product has? Is it going to be stellar customer service? Is it going to be something about the way you approach your pricing model? SaaS versus an hourly rate versus an unlimited model, whatever it might be. And then how do you communicate that clearly so people understand how you're different? Leveraging your story. I see this more and more, and for as long as I've really been an entrepreneur, I feel like this has been kind of a truth, which is that people like to feel invested in a story. They like to kind of see the story behind the brand. As companies get really large, they kind of lose like the identity, the story. I don't think anybody really thinks of Google and kind of thinks about like the founder and the founder's journey and kind of like what that company really means. Most people probably couldn't even name, the founder or the current, CEO of a Google. When you have a startup, I believe that it behooves you to put yourself forward and to make yourself a part of the story. Why did you start this company? What was the reason for doing that? Were there some problems that you had that, were you in this target market and you wanted to build a better way? I think it's a mistake to try to pretend like you're larger than you are. I think you should own it. You should own that you are a small company and try to develop an emotional connection with the users. People like to root for the underdog. So be transparent, be authentic, and connect emotionally. Maximizing resources and working smarter. It's a fact that you are going to have less resources than larger competitors, but it is not a fact that you have to be less efficient than them. A lot of large companies just have waste. They just spend money on things that like just don't really matter. And because they're already making so much money, they don't even notice. And money just kind of goes to different places and nobody's even aware of all the waste and the excessive spending and different things. That's your opportunity to be efficient and to maximize your resources. There's no shortage of growth hacking techniques out there. There are people that have achieved viral growth with spending close to zero, or zero, and just utilizing their time and some creativity. It's not easy, it's hard. It's hard to kind of come up with these things, but it's possible. People do them. And I don't think it's ever been as easy as it is today to create content and to, get in front of an audience. The opportunities across content marketing, blogging, podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, whatever it is, audiences are out there in a way that they never used to be before. There is a lot of noise. I will say that. And that is difficult, that you're sort of competing with the noise. But nevertheless, if you can understand where your audience gathers, there are often a lot of cost-effective marketing strategies that you can use to get in touch with them. Using data to make strategic decisions. In my experience, it is often the case that data is never as complete as we would like at small companies. I run a marketing agency. I've run software businesses. We have data. We track things. We have our KPIs. We have our internal metrics and things like that. But there's often some stuff missing, right? Because we don't have an in-house data analyst. We don't necessarily have all the best tools to collect that data. We don't necessarily have a large enough user base to get meaningful data. So you have to kind of, couple being data driven with also kind of, intuition and logic and things that will help kind of fill in the gaps. I think it's a good habit to get in the habit of being data driven and making that a part of your decision making, because over time, more and more data tends to become available, and it's good to develop that type of culture. However, lack of data or lack of conclusion in the data should not always be a reason to, have paralysis analysis, to not take action on something. Again, remember that as a small company, you have to make moves, you have to be agile. And sometimes the best thing is to do something, see what happens, and then make changes, undo it if needed to. There are few decisions that we make that we can't move back from, right? I was talking with someone the other day, and they had a new website landing page that they designed, and they launched it, and it wasn't converting as well as the last one. There's like, what do we do? What's wrong with it? It would have been good to A/B test that beforehand, but they didn't. And my first advice was, well, why don't you just go back to the old one, right? Like, I'm not saying that we can't consider a new landing page or try to improve the other one. But wait a minute, let's just understand that the other one was working better. So let's go back to that for now. Let's undo the problem and then think about, how to kind of go from there. Many things can be undone. Customer service, man. This is one of the things that I feel is a big opportunity for smaller businesses. As someone who, again, has been a founder a couple of times, I have been in the customer support for many, many hours. When I had my first software startup, I was the dude doing the customer support for like months, and I probably was doing it to some degree for years. Eventually, I maybe hired some people to also work on it, but it was a long time before I really wasn't doing anything with it at all. First of all, customer service is just a really good way to understand your target market. It's a great way to learn about their problems, and to see the flaws in your business and your product, and to see, how you can make things better. It's really hard to create a great user experience if you don't have a good streamlined dialogue with the users, and customer service is that channel because that's where people with problems go. So while large companies might immediately default to the chatbots and the automated systems and things like that because that's going to save them a lot of money, and they can kind of get away with that because they're large and they feel like they can kind of do what they want, people still really appreciate like having some hands-on customer support. And there's really an opportunity when you deliver really good customer support for someone to turn someone into like a loyal user, to basically make sure that they have such a great experience that they feel really attached to the product and the business. Targeting niche markets that big players ignore. This actually kind of goes back to one of the other ones about like underserved markets and things like that. But I think it's a little bit different because when we talk about like the underserved users, we're really talking about users within the competitor's market that are not being served well. Whereas I think this one is a subtle difference where we're actually kind of saying, let's target a market that the competitor isn't targeting at all. Not an underserved market, just in like a non-served market, like a market that is adjacent, and that big players are ignoring because maybe they feel that it's not worth their time. It's not, that there's not as much money there, that the people don't have as much money, maybe geographically, demographically, whatever it might be, that it just doesn't suit their business. It's just not worth it for them to kind of, the economics don't work for them. That's a potential opportunity for you to take a business model or a product from a competitor and apply it to a non-served market that is being ignored, and can be a good way to kind of get started. So, all that being said, we discussed a number of points. I think there were 8 points about how you can take your startup and how you can outmaneuver the competitors. Um, it's it's hard. I've been in situations where I launched businesses where there were already established competitors. Never like, hey, we're going up against Google or something like that. I've never really gone up against the billion dollar companies, but companies that had momentum, that they had years of growth behind them, and they had products and things like that. And it is challenging, but there were always opportunities. There's always things that the other guys just aren't doing, and that is where you should kind of get started. And often they are not going to make those changes overnight. Like they can't iterate fast enough. Their product is already too complex. It's hard for them to basically introduce some of these things, and you can actually be the first mover in kind of adding those features or whatever it is. So don't give up. Keep trying to grow that startup. And like I mentioned, my name is Dave. I run Philly Tech Entrepreneurs, and appreciate you guys checking out our monthly webinar.